The film opens in America during the Prohibition era, a time when alcohol was illegal. We are introduced to a drifter named John Smith, who is driving from Texas to Mexico. Through his thoughts, we learn that John is a man who is always on the move. This time, he decides to stop in a small town called Jericho, which lies about 50 kilometers from the US-Mexico border. Upon his arrival, John notices some gang members hanging out by the road, and even a coffin seller gives him a creepy smile. But before John even steps into Jericho, he finds himself in trouble with Doyle's gang when he accidentally looks at a woman named Felina, who is Doyle's girlfriend, as she crosses the road. This brief glance angers the gang, and they vandalize John's car, leaving him furious and upset. Frustrated, John heads to the sheriff's office to report the incident, but the two sheriffs, Ed G. and Bob, only cowardly advise him to leave town as soon as possible instead of offering any help. While waiting for his car to be fixed, John goes to an inn and decides to have a drink at the bar owned by Joe Monday. As they talk, John learns that the gang members who ruined his car are part of the Irish gang. Joe explains that the Irish and Italian gangs have been bitter enemies ever since both arrived in Jericho, and their constant fighting has forced many residents to flee to safer areas. After Joe reveals the location of the Irish gang's headquarters, John decides to confront them, armed with his gun, and demand compensation for the damage to his car. When John arrives at the Irish gang's hideout, he asks them to pay for the damage, but instead of negotiating, they attempt to shoot him. Realizing he's in danger, John swiftly draws his gun and shoots the gang members first, killing several. Word of John's victory in the shootout spreads quickly, and Fredo Strozzi, the Italian gang leader, becomes impressed by John's gunfighting abilities, especially since he took down some of Doyle's best men. Strozzi offers John a job with the Italian gang, explaining that a war with the Irish gang could be imminent once their top shooter returns from Mexico. Strozzi offers John a substantial amount of money, which tempts him to accept. John agrees to join the Italian gang. Strozzi then arranges for his assistant and girlfriend, Lucy Kalinsky, to show John to his room. That evening, John joins the Italian gang members for dinner, where Strozzi introduces him as their best shooter. However, Giorgio, Strozzi's younger cousin and close advisor, disagrees with the decision, worried that hiring John might break the ceasefire between the two rival gangs in Jericho. Strozzi, however, dismisses his concerns and goes ahead with his decision. Not wanting to escalate the conflict between the two gangs, John decides to return to Joe's motel. Once back in his room, John calls for a call girl to spend the night with him, but it turns out that the woman is actually a spy sent by Doyle's gang to gather information. This leads to a shootout at the motel, and John has to defend himself against the gangsters who are trying to kill him. Upon hearing about the attack, Strozzi quickly orders Lucy to go pick up John from the motel, and as John and Lucy head to the meeting place, John tries to learn more about Strozzi's mysterious first name. Lucy explains that Strozzi's first name is special, and she only uses it when they are alone together. Soon after, they arrive at the meeting spot, and Strozzi announces to his men that he has learned that Doyle has taken control of their drink supplier from Mexico. Strozzi plans to teach the Irish gang a lesson by hijacking the truck carrying the drinks meant for Doyle. The hijacking goes smoothly, thanks to bribed local officials who were supposed to protect the shipment. These corrupt officials switch sides and help Strozzi, ensuring the success of the hijacking. Later, John meets with Ed at the sheriff's office and asks him to ensure the safety of the call girl who had been spying for Doyle. John knows that if she stays in town, Doyle will likely kill her. He also tells Ed that Strozzi's gang hijacked the truck meant for Doyle, hoping to sell this information to Doyle for $1,000. Ed hesitates, unsure whether to trust John, fearing for his own life if the information turns out to be false. Despite this, John reassures Ed that the information is accurate, and even suggests they share the $1,000 if the deal goes through. A little later, John visits Lucy in her room, since Strozzi and Giorgio are out of town. John asks Lucy for information about Strozzi because he plans to sell it to Doyle. He promises to share the proceeds if the deal goes through. Lucy, who secretly has feelings for John, cannot resist his request, especially after he charms her into spending the night with him. The following day, Doyle offers John the chance to join the Irish gang, even promising a large sum of money if he accepts. However, John does not give Doyle an answer immediately and tells him he needs time to think about it. After meeting with Doyle, John goes to Strozzi's headquarters and tells him he wants to leave the Italian gang. This angers Giorgio, who suspects that Doyle offered John more money. John deliberately keeps his intentions unclear, hoping to further escalate the tensions between the two gangs. A few days later, Hickey, who has just returned to Jericho, hears about the hijacking of the truck carrying drinks meant for Doyle. This infuriates Hickey, and he plans to take revenge on Strozzi and his men. Meanwhile, John goes to check on his car at the repair shop. The mechanic tells him that someone came by asking about the car's owner a few days ago. John suspects that Giorgio might be trying to eliminate him, so he decides to manipulate the two gangs into fighting each other. He calls Giorgio and warns him that Doyle has discovered the Italian gang's hijacking of the truck. John also mentions rumors that Doyle plans to kill Strozzi, who is now working with a man named Ramirez, the chief of police at the border. Though John is no longer part of the Italian gang, he assures Giorgio that the information is reliable. That evening, John meets with Lucy to exchange more information about Strozzi and his gang. Lucy reveals that Giorgio is heading to Mexico to meet Ramirez. Having taken John's warning seriously, Giorgio believes John's information is accurate. The next day, John goes to the Irish gang and tells them that Giorgio is heading to Mexico to bribe Ramirez, which is part of a plan by the Italian gang to hijack another drink truck. John cleverly suggests to Doyle that they should capture Giorgio, who is Strozzi's cousin. Doyle is pleased with this idea and gives John a lot of money for the information, but John only takes $2,000 as agreed earlier. During the meeting, Doyle also asks John if he has decided to join the Irish gang, but John avoids giving a clear answer, which annoys Doyle. Later, Doyle sends Hickey to Mexico to stop the meeting between Giorgio and Ramirez. When Hickey arrives at the bar where Giorgio and Ramirez are meeting, he pulls out his gun and starts shooting at the bar patrons, including Giorgio and Ramirez. Realizing he's in danger, Giorgio surrenders to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Meanwhile, John visits an old church in a remote part of Jericho, where he finds Felina praying for her late daughter. Felina shares her sad story with John, revealing that she had once been married to a poor man and had a daughter, but Doyle, who deeply loved her, kidnapped her, and in the process, she lost her daughter. John is surprised to find Felina at the church without any guards. Felina explains that the church is the only place where Doyle doesn't send anyone to watch over her. When John returns to town, he meets Captain Tom Pickett, a senior Texas Ranger, who asks John to help get rid of the gangsters in Jericho and end their feuding. Tom advises John to continue playing both sides without fully joining either gang so he can help destroy one of them. Tom gives John 10 days to complete this task and tells him he can use any methods necessary. Meanwhile, Hickey and his men go to the Italian gang's headquarters and inform them that they have captured Giorgio. They demand a ransom of $100,000 if Strozzi wants to save Giorgio. At this point, the two gangs agree to make the exchange near the US-Mexico border. But Strozzi had a hidden agenda. Instead of bringing actual money, he had secretly kidnapped Felina as leverage for Giorgio's release. When Strozzi opened his suitcase, it was filled with stacks of paper, not cash, which made Doyle furious. However, Doyle was powerless to act as long as Felina was still under Strozzi's control. Strozzi made his demand. Doyle had to hand over Giorgio if he wanted to save Felina. Doyle, deeply in love with Felina, agreed to the deal and took her with him, leaving Giorgio in Strozzi's custody. The next day, Lucy, who had been kicked out of Strozzi's headquarters, met with John. She told him that the previous night, Strozzi had gotten extremely drunk and had beaten her severely after she accidentally called him by his first name. Feeling unable to live in Jericho any longer, Lucy asked John for help in escaping the town. Without hesitation, John gave her the money she needed to start a new life in another city, showing his concern for her. That evening, John met with Doyle and told him that he had decided to join the Irish gang led by Doyle. However, John insisted on being paid up front for his services, knowing that his skills as a sharpshooter would be valuable. John then asked Doyle about Felina, pretending to be worried for her safety, especially since Strozzi had hired so many shooters. Unaware of John's true intentions, Doyle explained that Felina was hiding in a safe house, protected by 8 guards. John, feigning concern, warned Doyle that this wouldn't be enough protection, as he had heard that Strozzi had hired over 20 shooters from out of town to target them. Doyle, anxious and worried, immediately asked John to go protect Felina at the safe house. When John arrived at the safe house, he quickly entered and found the guards sitting down to dinner. Without wasting any time, he shot them all. He then went upstairs to the room where Felina was being held and found her under the watch of another guard. John didn't hesitate and shot the guard, setting Felina free. He handed her $1,000 that he had taken from Doyle, telling her to leave Jericho immediately. As she was about to drive away, Felina gave John her cross necklace as a token of gratitude for helping her escape Doyle's trap. The following morning, Doyle and his men arrived at the safe house to check on Felina, only to find it empty. They were met with bad news from John, who lied and told them that when he arrived, he found the guards already dead, but Felina was nowhere to be found. While Doyle seemed to believe John's story, Hickey, who was secretly suspicious, began to wonder if John might have been the one responsible for the attack. When John returned to Jericho, Doyle and his men confronted him after discovering his deception. They revealed that Strozzi had nothing to do with the attack on Felina's safe house. John was the one behind it. They had found Felina's cross necklace in John's jacket pocket, which exposed his lie. As they tortured him, Doyle demanded to know where Felina was, but John refused to speak. The beating continued until John was left badly injured and helpless. Afterward, Doyle and his men left John there, thinking he was out of commission. However, when Doyle's men returned later to check on him, they were shocked to find that John had somehow escaped the room where he had been locked up. Panic set in, and Doyle immediately ordered his men to block all exits from the city to catch John before he could flee. They also searched Joe's bar and motel, but there was no sign of him. Doyle's frustration and fear grew as he wondered where John could be hiding. Joe, who had seen John earlier at the casino, Strozzi's gang's headquarters, told Doyle's men where to find him. However, John had been hiding in Joe's ice storage area the whole time, evading detection. Meanwhile, Doyle's men attacked Strozzi's casino, setting it on fire, thinking that John was hiding there. They hoped he would burn to death in the flames. The following day, Joe took John to an old church that Felina often visited. There, they met with Ed, who had been waiting for them. Unfortunately, Hickey soon caught Joe and realized he had lied, learning that John was not at the casino. He and his men tortured Joe, trying to force him to reveal John's whereabouts, but Joe refused to cooperate. Meanwhile, Ed, who had witnessed Joe's arrest, quickly informed John about it. Feeling grateful to Joe for his help, John decided to return to Jericho, even though he was still recovering from his injuries. When he arrived at Doyle's headquarters, John launched an attack on Doyle's men to rescue Joe. Doyle and Hickey were planning to head to Mexico for business, so John sent a message through Ed, telling them that he would be waiting for them at the old church. Finally, Doyle and Hickey arrived at the church, where John was waiting. During their confrontation, Doyle offered John a chance to put the past behind them and join his gang, asking him to work alongside Hickey. However, John wasn't interested in the offer at all. Just then, Joe emerged from his hiding spot and shot Doyle. John, however, was quick to react and easily defeated Hickey. In the final scene, John took the cross necklace from Doyle's coat pocket and drove away in the gangster's car, continuing his journey to Mexico.